let's do this big excessive movie that's super risky in the jungle. How can I reach out to like the edges of what's possible with Fitzcarraldo, this movie, Apocalypse Now? It's all like just filmmakers like thrill seeking. How can I live on the edge, teeter upon, on the edge of a hit movie and a complete disaster?
Sounds very cocaine to me.
Motherfucking goddamn orange peel beef.
All right, everybody.
Come on.
It's one fucking hour time. The show, of course, where we talk about one goddamn movie for one fucking hour. I am Evan Husney, and we got to my left, Tom Fitzgerald. What's going on, man? How are you?
Hey, what's going on?
Good to have you. Good to have you back. Yeah. Another week.
Good to be anywhere.
It is. Another film, another year, another episode. Here we go. And, of course, we have to my right, as always, Mr. Marcus Herring. Marcus, what's going on?
What's up, guys? I guess it's going to be a bit of a bittersweet episode this week as we bid farewell to Mr. Friedkin and talk about this movie, right?
That's right.
What are we on? 77. Wow.
77. We are on episode 77, of course, chronicling a movie from 1977, normally that y'all would have voted on via our Instagram polls. But for this week, we decided, as Marcus alluded to, in light of William Friedkin's recent passing, we decided, hey, you know what? Fuck it. Let's do Sorcerer as a way to sort of pay tribute to Friedkin. Look, I mean, I've met him a few times. He's always been super good to me. He was a funny presence to have around. But he's also inspired a lot of content here on the show. We've referenced him many times in the archives. We have one fucking hour on French Connection you could check out. Great episode. And actually one of my favorite episodes of the entire show we've ever done is one fucking hour on cruising. I really, really loved that look into that movie. Its complicated history, some of the crazy set pieces in that, and the reevaluation of that movie. So I think, I think it's worth us kind of saying, you know what? Make an executive decision. Episode 77 is Sorcerer time. So, and it might have won the poll anyway, guys. So we
That's
we said
true,
that
because it was up against I think The Cat from Outer Space was one of the other options.
Exorcist 2. It was up against Exorcist 2. So.
And The Island of Dr. Moreau.
Yeah, right.
We'd already done the only real movie of 1977. We already did anyway, too, right? So Star Wars. So
that's right. Star Wars in the archive. So
Star Wars. That's true.
Well, actually, that's a very relevant film to tonight's episode, which we will get into. We'll get into.
I have some thoughts on that.
Oh, definitely. I'm sure you do. But before we dive into tonight's episode on Sorcerer, just want to give a quick shout out, of course, to the One Fucking Hour Patreon. Patreon.com/One Fucking Hour is where you can sign up to become part of the One Fucking Hour Special People's Club for just $5 a month. That gives you the unfettered access to a lot of this bonus content we've been doing, mainly our DVD-style audio commentary tracks, which are very exciting. We have Blue Velvet up there. We got Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Psycho 98, Star Wars, in fact. We've done an audio commentary track to Star Wars.
Right.
But most recently, we just dropped fresh. It's up there right now. If you go to patreon.com/One Fucking Hour, you can download our most recent commentary, which was on Tom. What was it on?
I'm sorry, What Women Want.
That's right. We made Tom watch What Women Want. And Tom, how did it go for you? What'd you think?
I don't know. It's hard. I'm still picking up the pieces. I didn't know what to expect. It was worse than I expected, which was not much. But I had a ball.
Yeah,
it was like a fun conversation.
It's like well over 2 hours, so it's 2 fucking hours on What Women Want.
God.
And
Yes.
and Tom got a nice exposure, firsthand exposure to the comedic the comedic slapstick attempts of Mel Gibson,
right,
which were mega cringe, right?
He's not a comic.
No.
And this is a
He's
comedy
trying
film,
to be funny.
And these are comic situations. and he's just like a big chunky stumbler. There's no comic timing or grace. It's really excruciating.
He's just a disgusting oaf. It's like horrible.
Yeah, he's so oafish and blunt and crude.
No,
He has no like the physical wit of comedy. It's just brutal.
Chunky
Like right
stumbler.
here. This is hell. I quit.
I know, it's hell. It's hell on
This is
earth.
such hell. I mean, for all kinds of reasons. I did find out that the chaplain of our era is Mel Gibson. Who'd have thunk, man? Yeah, it was. I literally looked away like a lot when he was doing his physical comedy set pieces. I was like, I can't. This is elective. I don't have to look at this. Like, I'm not doing it, you know?
Yeah,
And, no, I hate him with a passion. He's awful. If you hate Mel Gibson, I got your next 2 hours set up for you. Just watch our commentary. You know,
Totally.
a hate watch. On Mel.
Totally true. Totally true. And Marcus, you tagged out on that one. And I think you dodged a bullet. So I think that was a wise choice.
As
Whatever you
conscientious
did instead-
objector. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever you did instead for those 2 hours is better.
But we had
Waiting
I
we
for
had
clipped coupons. I was
Yeah.
clipping coupons.
There you go.
there you
See?
go. But we were joined by our special guest, Remy Bennett, who took the plunge with us into What Women Want. So definitely get in there, sign up for the Patreon, or if you want, scroll down to the bottom. If you're watching this on YouTube, right underneath our video is a button, the join button. You can also subscribe. You can become a member of our YouTube channel for also $5 a month. Get the same perks. You pick Patreon or YouTube. Sign up there. That's the best way to support the show. If you love what we're doing, we sincerely appreciate your contribution. And we're going to keep hooking you up with this bonus exclusive content. So, all right. That is that. Are you guys ready to get into episode 77? Shall we do it?
Yeah.
All right. We're going to start that clock. Here it comes. The hour clock starts now. All right. A little bit of backstory or a little bit of synopsis action here on Sorcerer. All right. Based on the 1953 French film The Wages of Fear, Sorcerer is set in the small South American town of Porvenir, Colombia, where four men on the run from the law are offered $10,000 and legal citizenship if they will transport a shipment of dangerously unstable nitroglycerin to an oil well 200 miles away. Led by Jackie Scanlon, played by Roy Scheider, the men set off on a hazardous journey during which they must contend with dangerously rocky roads, unstable bridges, and attacks from local guerrillas. The four fight for their lives as they struggle to complete their dangerous quest. All right, that is Sorcerer, and as we're gonna get into this, we kind of mentioned, we teased at the end of last week's episode that this was going to be a Baby Got Backstory episode. Isn't that right, Tom?
Yeah. Once in a while, there's one movie that we pick where it's just like, as much as anything, how the film hit the screen is like its own movie. You know what I mean? Like, and this is one of them. This is a wild, crazy story. The journey to get this on screen. You know, like kind of like on par with like Lucifer Rising, for example, something we did recently.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's in the archive. Shout out to that episode, of course. And I think the reason, just real quick before we get into that backstory, the reason we're also doing this, as we mentioned, is in sort of honor of, or in light of Friedkin's passing, but also just a little quick personal anecdote out of the gate. As I mentioned earlier, I had a chance to work with him on two separate occasions on very small projects. But a little personal anecdote. It was pretty amazing. I was working on the release of a documentary called The Wolf Pack, Tom. You remember that film?
Oh, do I? I think I saw the world premiere.
That's right. At Sundance.
Pack in attendance.
That's right. If you haven't seen it, it's a great documentary about a group of six brothers, 6 or 7 brothers. It's a lot of, who lived in isolation in New York City. Basically, the first 15 years of their lives, they spent confined to their very small, like 2-bedroom apartment in the Lower East Side, Manhattan.
Sitting in front of a television.
Right.
Yeah, it's a wild movie.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And so instead of going outside, they watched movies. And then they also reenacted their favorite scenes from their favorite movies, kind of making their own DIY props and costumes and things. And it's amazing. And so they're but eventually they were able to break free and live more normal lives, and that's what a big part of the doc. But they, growing up as movie fans, they always dreamed about going to Los Angeles. And one thing we did in support of the release of the film is we brought them to Los Angeles, and they met like an array of different filmmakers who just wanted to meet them. They had seen the documentary, like David O. Russell really wanted to meet them. And so that we filmed a little sequence with him. And then I actually called Friedkin to see if he wanted to do it, because I had seen a Q&A of this film, of Sorcerer, just a few months prior here at BAM in Brooklyn. And he was amazing. He was like a stand-up comedian getting up there telling these stories, you know, with that delivery that he has, talking about all these scenes and swearing and shit this and fuck that. And it was amazing. I loved it. I really, really loved it. So I thought he'd be great on camera with these kids. And so he jumped at the chance to do it. We sent him the film. He said, yeah, let's do it. And then, of course, we met up at your guys' theater, and we filmed this little piece. And it was amazing that he looks at these kids, you know, who've led this incredibly traumatic life. And he was like...
So I saw your film last night, and I thought it was terrific. To those of us who didn't go through what you guys went through, it's very disturbing. I found it... I don't know how the hell you guys walked away from that, or have you? The first thing I thought was, you are highly intelligent. You know, you're not a bunch of dumbasses, you know?
And you're not just a bunch of dumbasses. You know, that was like the first thing that he said to them. Like, okay. And it was like, yeah, it does. And then it was like, so how old were you when you saw The Exorcist? He says to one of the kids, and the kids is like...
for me, about like 6, I think.
10? 6?
Or like,
I
was about
These
8 years
guys
old.
must be more fucked up than I think they are.
Yeah.
You know, is what he said.
But
And so he was just roasting these kids, and it was kind of amazing. But and I'll cut to the chase, and I'll shut up. But basically, it led to this great moment where they're sitting on the couches that you guys had at the theaters, and one of the kids turns to Friedkin and asks him a very poignant question. He's like, what do you think the greatest invention is by a human being? That's the question he asked him, not a film question. He asked him what he thinks the greatest invention is. And Billy went on this kind of very touching soliloquy about humanity's greatest invention is faith and love. And he went on this very poetic rant, which was kind of beautiful and actually very touching in a lot of ways. And so you can see that in the doc. If you want to see it, I'll link it in the description of the video that we made. But shout out to Friedkin, man. That was super cool that he just spent the afternoon with us to do that.
That's so cool. It's so awesome to hear that. We had the opportunity to meet a fair amount of really cool and great directors and creatives there, and other walks, other parts of our career. We've met awesome people and worked with them. I think I did have a special kind of affinity for him when we got to meet him. And I think one of the times that he was hanging out at the theater was I was there that day with you, Evan, talking to him a bit. And, even though he was this like towering figure, I felt he was like really approachable and down to earth in a way. And he would engage with you and talk to you and treat you with respect, And I just thought, for me, like I kind of looked at it as though like he had this great career, this great success. He came from humble beginnings, and then he had these huge peaks, and then he had this like this career like went downhill too. So he kind of like had a landing where he became a normal person again, and just a normal person that had really good stories that he was willing to share. So that was the kind of the vibes that I didn't know him. I only saw him those couple times, but that was the vibe that I got from him.
100%. Yes, right on the money. Right on the money. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Because he would do these Q&As around. He would do Q&As for this film, for Cruising, Exorcist, and all those Q&As were like hour-long stand-up, like kind of like an evening with William Friedkin where he would just tell you the funniest fucking stories, and it was great. So it's cool that he got to have that, that sort of last 10 years, or so. Right. But let's get into this here, a little transition. You mentioned he came from humble beginnings. Let's sort of talk about, as a nice companion piece to tonight's episode, is William Friedkin's memoir, which is called The Friedkin Connection, which is a source for tonight's episode on Sorcerer. So here's a little part here I'm just going to read, guys, that is kind of a snapshot of where he was at going into Sorcerer, because, of course, he had just done Exorcist, right, Tom, which was a fucking phenomenon, right?
It was right then the biggest film, the biggest box office blockbuster ever. I mean... Star Wars, actually even Jaws. It had 2 years to be the top film of all time. And even beyond box office sales, it was a phenomenon. Like everybody was talking about it. I know this is doofy, but it was kind of like the Barbie of its time, where that it broke out and everyone has seen it or has a thought on it or something, you know, or they've hearing about it, you know. The Exorcist was not a movie, not normal at all. It was beyond a phenomenon.
An experience that you had to witness. Even my dad still talks about it to this day. He saw The Exorcist on mescaline and is never and couldn't actually sleep for about 2 years after he did that. And he still talks about that. He still talks about that.
I bet.
It's very special.
Yeah,
it's definitely one of those things that entered into the public consciousness in a way that other films haven't. Like, everybody knows the pea soup thing, the head spinning thing. You know, there are all these moments that are just like remixed and skits, parodies, other films, references. You know, like, I found it hard. The first time I watched it, I had a hard time watching it with fresh eyes as a kid, because you already know so much about it going in, just because it
so
reached
iconic.
into the culture. Yeah.
Totally. So here's a little snapshot of where Billy's at this point, post-Exorcist. He says, and I won't do the Billy voice, but he says, at that point, I was spending more time with lawyers and accountants than actors or writers. I had fallen into the trap of losing focus on the work and concentrating instead on peripherals. My behavior during this period was erratic. I was at the edge of a cliff, and my demons were standing by, waiting to push me off. And that's, I think, code a little bit, Tom, right, for a little nose candy action, right?
In other words, cocaina. Yeah. I think he was one of the most notorious, Hoovers.
Hoovers.
The booger sugar back then. Yeah. like the poster child of Hollywood's, cocaine madness.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel that it does bleed through, and you feel it almost in this film, you know.
Oh yeah, which will definitely absolutely.
And where did they shoot it again?
Yeah, I was gonna say, is that why he's like, let's?
Where did they shoot it?
Dominican
What was
Republic. Yeah. Ultimately, the
where was
Dominican
it set?
Republic.
Excuse me, where was it set?
Colombia.
Colombia.
Right. Sorry. Never mind.
Okay. All right. Reading on here. The question of what to do next continued to elude me. It had been more than 2 years since I directed a film, and I was going back and forth between New York and Los Angeles, buying paintings and antique furniture and enjoying the spoils of success. Little Lars Ulrich action there, I guess, for homeboy there. I was no longer the kid from Chicago who walked or took the subway everywhere and played in pickup basketball games. I was playing in tennis instead and driving a new Mercedes. There was a disconnect between who I was and what I had become. And then he goes on to sort of talk about, his various talk show appearances, and on those talk show appearances, he was frequently asked, what were the films that influenced him? And he says, the two that came to mind were H.G. Clouseau's Wages of Fear and Diabolique, both French films I hadn't seen for 20 years. I started to think about a new version of The Wages of Fear, not a remake, but based on the same premise: 4 men, strangers in a foreign country, fugitives, broke and desperate, who sign on to drive 2 trucks carrying crates of nitroglycerin to extinguish an oil well fire 200 miles away, across unforgiving landscapes. The premise seemed to me a metaphor for the countries of the world. Find a way to work together or explode. My film would have wholly original characters. I would make it grittier than Clouseau's film with the documentary feel for which I had become known. And that's what he set out to do, man. He wanted to make a film about the unlikeliest of heroes, a swindler, a terrorist, a hitman, and a driver for the Irish mob with no redeeming characteristics, but make the audience care about those people by the end. That was his goal.
I have a thought about the remake aspect of it. That he wanted to remake the Clouseau movie, and like I noticed, he's at one point he's talking about like something I read. He was saying that he basically looked at the Coppola's The Conversation as like he was the first time he saw it. He's like, oh, this is a ripoff or a remake of Blow Up, but just with recording instead of a photographer. So I wondered if that kind of got the wheels in his brain going about like, what could I remake?
That's interesting.
Of Coppola, I heard that he was was most competitive with Coppola of all the big, that pack of new Hollywood guys, and he was getting wind of everything happening with Apocalypse Now, and he went, well, I'm going to the fucking jungle too. I'll see you there, buddy. I don't know. I read that, and it makes sense to me. Like the way those guys were back then, the egos,
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
There's definitely something about like, let's do this big excessive movie that's super risky in the jungle. How can I reach out to like the edges of what's possible with Fitzcarraldo, this movie, Apocalypse Now? It's all like just filmmakers like thrill seeking. How can I live on the edge, teeter upon, on the edge of a hit movie and a complete disaster?
Sounds very cocaine to me.
Yeah, totally. And it does feel like out of all the films in his filmography, it's very eclectic, interesting filmography. Friedkin, this one, Sorcerer does feel like his most kind of Herzog attempt. The idea of what we talked about in the episode about Aguirre, Wrath of God, or of course with Fitzcarraldo, like the idea of doing the impossible, trying to bring everybody, subject everybody to realizing this very lofty and ambitious vision that's almost unfilmable.
Do we know that he saw Aguirre? We have like evidence of that. Has he said before, like, well, wow, when I saw that changed everything?
No, he didn't, but he does allude to Fitzcarraldo in the memoir. He almost relates to the experience, not of the film, but of actually the man himself, in the ambition of wanting to do a certain set piece, the most famous set piece in the film, the bridge sequence, which we'll get to, in terms of what went into actually doing that, because as you'll hear, it was a fucking nightmare.
The only thing that's missing is he should have hired a documentary film crew to make like one of the best movies about making movies ever, just like Apocalypse has with Hearts of Darkness and Fitzcarraldo has with Burden of Dreams, right?
100%.
Sorcerer needs one of those, damn it.
Yeah, that would have been awesome. That was a good point. So to get back to the backstory, so with that kind of concept in mind, with Wages of Fear, this kind of loose, modern, more remake, edgier, grittier version of it, Universal was the studio that sort of allowed him to do that and to develop the idea, to get it to develop the screenplay as the first project they would do together, Studio and Friedkin. And but first he had to actually acquire the rights to Wages of Fear in order to move ahead. Clouzot did not own them, but the author of the source material, a French author named Georges Arnaud, who had a long-standing feud with Clouzot, actually is the guy that retained the rights. He was happy to license the rights to Friedkin. However, he wanted Friedkin to meet with Clouzot in order to make sure he got his blessing. And Clouzot, who actually would pass away the year of release of Sorcerer in 1977, he was not in good health. He was just about to get surgery, and it was not looking good for him. But Clouzot could not even himself wrap his head around the idea of why somebody like Friedkin, who's at the peak, the apex of his career, just having this huge monster hit film, would want to remake his movie, from 20 years ago. He couldn't even understand it. And of course he had no power to stop him from doing it, but he wasn't jazzed on the idea. And as usual, Friedkin audible style, he's always thinking on his feet. When he kind of saw the conversation was going a little south, he's like, look, I'll give you a share of the profits. So if this movie becomes a success, you'll share in it too. And I think that's what sort of pushed the needle forward, and he was able to get the green light blessings in order to do it.
Bad deal, though.
Yeah, right.
Don't do it.
But
yeah,
actually,
right.
It's funny that he calls it sorry, you can go. Sorry, I just, that he, the fact that he, whenever he's asked about it being a remake, he gets kind of bristly about it in interviews, I noticed, even though it is like, I guess it's an adaptation of the book and more than that's how he envisions it. But I mean, it is sort of like splitting hairs. Like, it's not a remake. It's just basically I did the same film but differently.
The same, the source
same
material.
story. Yeah.
But it's funny. It just caught my ear when you were just saying that. Even Clouzot was like, what's the Exorcist director doing next? Like, what now? Because that's what he is. Like, forget Friedkin. It's like he's the Exorcist director. And this is a classic thing we call the Magnolias. It's when someone makes the big movie and then they have the blank check. That's what it's all about. And Friedkin had I really feel like maybe the biggest blank check of the 70s at least. And, that's 73. And by, and then by 70, so 73 is Exorcist. By 77, he did Sorcerer. And it does seem curious because, that was a huge film. Now, the thing is, another movie in 77 that came out was The Exorcist II, The Heretic, the sequel to his film, which is an abomination, and derided by everybody. And it still kind of, in my opinion, sucks and is fun, but it's just not good, kind of.
That could be a future
and so
episode of the show, by the way. I think.
we will definitely have to do that. Maybe in October for the
Yeah.
Halloween times.
Ooh,
but anyway, I guess
good
all
idea.
I'm trying to say is like that's Exorcist 2 in its execution is a classic Hollywood mentality, and also that's when sequels started really happening. Like this is I was also just thinking I'm giving maybe a larger cultural context. Is we were talking about a cusp. For a 67 to 68 in the beginning of our polling, and that we were big on cusp. It was between old school Hollywood and the new school Easy Rider Hollywood. This is a big cusp that Sorcerer is falling into, which is 77 into 78. And my point is that all I remember is Sorcerer does come out, and it doesn't do well because, of course not. Even though they tried to make it seem like it's the Exorcist director, and the title seems kind of demonic. Like, go and see it, and it just everybody's like, I don't know. I'm just looking at a truck. Like, what's going on?
Yeah,
I'm not going.
yeah.
And then a week later, is like Star Wars, and then they kept bringing back Star Wars, and one of the victims was like the second and third week showings of Sorcerer. So I think people, it's like it was an odd decision, but it was fatal because he didn't get the memo. And I'm quoting him right now. He's like, I didn't know that overnight Hollywood became the place of cute robots. Like because I didn't make a cute robot movie, and so I think this film singularly is fascinating as an artifact. It's basically a hardcore 1972 movie in the middle of a very different summer.
True.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. True.
Yeah.
True. So, so he gets the rights. Getting back to where we were, he gets the green light to do it, and he pairs up with Wally Green, who is the co-writer of The Wild Bunch, to write the script, and they collaborate on this.
And the Hellstrom Chronicle.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's
Really?
right. Yeah. So they work together, and basically Friedkin calls Wally an encyclopedia of classic art and literature, and he suggested that Friedkin read 100 Years of Solitude, which eventually became the template for Sorcerer. This idea, and then they sort of came up with the 4 desperate characters, as we said, who would wind up as fugitives in a poor village somewhere in South America. And then they sort of kind of tried to, come up with these 4 different vignettes, and that's how the movie opens. I mean, the movie opens with, you see these 4 different vignettes. It feels kind of strange because it's like they're lengthy vignettes. Obviously, the best is the last one, in my opinion, but they do feel like, I don't know. It kind of feels like modern television to me, or something like kind of prestige television opening. I could see being something like that. But go ahead. What were you?
It's really uneven. I feel like it's really uneven because the different lengths, the different times we spend with the characters isn't the same.
No,
it's very slow. It's like 20 minutes of that intro, and we're kind of used to like knowing what the story is going to be about within the first 10, right? The Sid Field style.
It's a bold
script.
choice.
Yeah, so 20 minutes, you don't know what this movie's about until 30, 40 minutes in. You don't get an idea of what is actually going to happen.
Who's the lead, for instance?
Yeah. And the intro, one more thing about the intro, sorry, just that everyone's speaking different languages. And what I'd read was that people were walking out of the theater because they thought it was like a foreign movie. They thought it was going to be all subtitles the whole time.
I don't blame
so much
them.
so that they actually put up a lobby card in the theaters that said they explained that the opening sequences would have subtitles in English, but they would all be in foreign languages. But don't worry, there was kind of a disclaimer on the lobby card, like, this is not a foreign movie, don't worry, you'll speak English at some point.
and ignore down the hall Star Wars, just watch this movie with 8 different languages for a half an hour. Holy shit. He was a freak. I got to say, it reminds me a little bit, in a cool way, of the opening of The Marathon Man. And not just because it includes Roy Scheider, but and actually even French Connection starts kind of oddly, too.
So does
with
The Exorcist.
subtitles.
The Exorcist starts in
The Exorcist?
in Africa or whatever. Is that where it is?
What's it,
Or-
Iraq?
or-
It's
That's
Iraq.
a long.
Iraq,
Yeah,
Cradle
that's
of
like
civilization.
15 minutes in Iraq.
He loves that.
Right.
He loves.
Oh, but
that.
there's Iraq, but then suddenly you're amongst like all these strangers in like Washington D.C. Like you don't see Linda Blair for a while either.
I know.
Right,
Good point.
He loves that. He
loves these
the
crazy
He loves the
preambles.
foreign. He loves the foreign prologue. You know.
Yeah,
It is sort of like literary, you in a book
Yeah.
you wouldn't bat an eye at that,
Sure.
But in a film, it's just a little bit. It stands out a little bit more, and I feel like in The Exorcist, you get to know that character, Father Merrin, that's going to come back later. In this one, the weird
lot
thing is
later.
you spend 20 minutes with these people. And I still don't feel like I know anybody except for the French guy, that well. He's
Yeah,
the
that's
only
the one
one who
that's-
you get instant insight into.
Yeah, because they spend the most time on him. Yeah, let's talk about what these 4 little vignettes are. Of course, you do have the one you mentioned, which is the one in Paris, France. There's a guy who is a stockbroker, sort of working on an embezzlement and kind of taking down his in-laws' family, drives his brother-in-law to commit suicide. There's an Arab terrorist who blows up a bank in Jerusalem. There's also the film opens with a hitman who kills a stranger in a hotel in Mexico. And then my favorite, the one that kind of feels like it should have been what the Saints of Newark felt like, is the...
Stop it.
had to
Told
get
you
that
not to bring
reference
that
in
up.
Yeah, please.
Is
There's
the,
a jar for that. You have to put $1 in the jar. In the Sopranos prequel.
Now I can't watch Sopranos for another 2 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Just because I
That's the
remember
penalty.
that.
No, totally. Actually, I was thinking personally. I'm not sure where you're going with this, but I was just like, can we have that movie, like set in like some shitty part of like New Jersey,
I know.
like an hour and a half on that,
I know. You're right. And of course, that set piece is the introduction of Roy Scheider's character. It's the last vignette.
Great.
And he's a
Great
wheelman for a gang of thieves who just robbed a church. Mob thieves, of course, who robbed a church in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And it builds to this incredible crescendo of a car crash. He's the only survivor of the car crash. Super intense. Well executed moment. Very almost traumatic when he sees the other guy in the car all covered in blood as he's staggering out of the car. And that actually, I just want to point. I'm sure we'll talk more about this in a minute, but Roy Scheider, and we'll talk about how he got into the movie too as well. But man, I think he's great in this movie. I don't know if you guys agree, but dude, he's like. I don't want to go. Maybe I don't want to overstep and say Martin Sheen Apocalypse Now. Like that's what Raimi was saying too when we were watching it.
I was thinking of that.
He really kind of goes there with this
He goes
performance.
Look, and then he did all that jazz 2 years later. Like we love him. Like he's still underrated. Like he's still under like Hoffman and Pacino, but like he's on par. He puts up high-powered performances.
He does,
and this is one of them.
He does, yeah. Real quick, I just want to talk about some of these vignettes really quick. Just a couple of anecdotes from Friedkin's book that were crazy. So the Jerusalem sequences where we're seeing the terrorist bombing, so this is just anecdotes of just how crazy this production is. So they had the cooperation of the Israeli security forces when they're filming there, and they actually appear in the movie as themselves. Again, a Friedkin sort of doc trick. But while they're filming this sequence of a terrorist bombing, an actual terrorist bombing occurred 2 blocks away from the film set. And so Friedkin and crew rushed over to actually steal shots of the aftermath of the real bombing. And so a lot of those sequences are actually in the film that you're seeing. Of all the people scrambling and some of the stuff, and
I love those instincts, and just to have that, the balls in the moment to do that. Like we're gonna drop this, do that, and go over there. And I mean, that's a real dynamite filmmaker instincts there.
Totally. He's
Well, he
so
did
good
start
at
with
that.
documentary. Did we say that before? Clearly,
We said that a
in the
couple
60s,
times.
he's a
Every
documentary
episode. we said
filmmaker.
that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we went to town on that with the French Connection episode, and you know how he comes from, changing people's lives with doc filmmaking. It's a huge part of his DNA. In the New Jersey sequence, real quick, again, Friedkin is this type of guy who's so connected in the world of organized crime figures. He knows them all, and we'll talk more about that too. But he, of course, knew a guy who really did, this is a true story, he really did carry out a robbery of a church in New Jersey. And so basically he dictated his entire experience. And what you see in the film, minus the car accident, is, what really happened in terms of the heist and everything. Yeah. So he turns that reality thing back into the movie. And my favorite little underappreciated cinematic detail in the whole New Jersey opening vignette. And dude, this movie has some killer pure cinema editing moments.
Agreed.
But
Smith, shout out.
Oh,
the
dude,
editor.
yeah. Dude, this movie is, even though there's lengthy set pieces that can be trimmed down, it does have some of its like killer peak action set pieces are some of the best edited sequences ever. Anyway, that little moment where we realize that there's a wedding happening at the church while the heist is going on, and then it cuts to the bride marrying this guy, and she has a black eye. The bride with a black eye is, with no explanation or context or exposition, is an incredible like Jersey detail.
Halloween costume.
Yeah.
Box office gold, right? There you go.
Did you mention that the guy in the heist, the dude is the guy who's the main leader in the heist, that gang member or whatever? He is the guy who told him the story. He's like a real life Irish gangster.
You're right. Yep, that's right. So again, folds him into what he's doing.
That's cool.
So
that is cool.
So now, like, let's just talk a little bit about the shooting location, because majority of the movie takes place in South America, and he knew he needed to find that, and he wanted that authentic location that he didn't want to build a studio set. He didn't want to shoot it in somewhere in the western part of the country,
Santa Monica Mountains or something.
Yeah, right. No, he wanted to go for that doc authenticity of finding a small poor village to film this in. And so he fell in love with Ecuador. That was where he wanted to film this movie. He loved the authenticity of it. He toured around. He met the natives. He just had a real connection to it. But the studio and primarily Lew Wasserman, who was the head of Universal at the time, was absolutely against the idea. No way you're going to Ecuador. You'll get killed. You get your cast and crew killed. We could never get insurance to film in a place like that, and stuff like that. So
that's a good Lew Wasserman.
Is it? I don't even know if he sounds
it's
like
the best
that.
I've heard. Kidding.
No, shut up. Oh, you really? I got flattered for half a second there. Okay. So Friedkin, though, decides that he would circle back. He'd put a pin in that, like, fuck, I want to film in Ecuador, and I'm not going to fight this guy right now, but I'm going to put a pin in it, and I'm going to try to put together the world's best, most irresistible cast ever. So then he will not say no to filming in Ecuador when he sees these great people. And the people he wanted to get on board for this movie originally was Steve McQueen in the Roy Scheider role, right?
Pretty cool.
Yep, I think, and he wanted some heavy-ass hitters. For the hitman, in the very beginning of the film, he wanted that to be played by Marcello Mastroianni. So
that would have been sick.
That would have been sick.
Yeah.
That would have been sick. And for the French guy, the embezzler, he wanted Lino Ventura, one of France's leading actors, to play that character. And the guy who plays in the terrorism scenes, he is the guy that would eventually he would cast this guy with a one word name.
Amadou,
right? Yeah, Amadou. There you go. And so that was what he wanted to do. But then, of course, he had to convince all these guys to go to fucking Ecuador and spend 2 to 3 months. And it was easier said than fucking done.
I love that idea of using all the biggest movie stars from all around the world. That's a great idea. It's too bad it didn't work out.
Yeah, it's like a Tarantino move, kind of. This idea of like, here's like, he wants to make this like film starring people from different corners of the earth that are going to come together in this random town. I do like that idea. And so let's take the titans of those places and cast them in those roles. It's kind of a cool idea. And so he approached Steve McQueen, who had just started dating Ally McGraw at that time. And he's like, and basically McQueen's like, there's no way I could leave her and, be in Ecuador for 2-3 months. And he said, unless you can write a part for her or you can make her a producer that gives her a reason to be there because she has her own career. And, Friedkin was just too much of a control freak at the time and was just like, no way, I can't do that. He self-admittedly in the autobiography or in his memoir, he says he was arrogant at the time. And he came to realize that, man, a close-up of Steve McQueen in this movie was definitely worth more than the location he wanted. Right?
It could have been a hit. That could have tilted it over. Yeah.
Yeah.
To be a pretty good hit. Yeah.
Yeah.
It seemed like he knew that he needed stars in this role. And, initially he set out thinking, I need stars. This movie needs stars. These characters need stars. Right. But then I think he was so full of himself at that time, and I think he thought my theory is he looked at The Exorcist and he's like, "Well, I did that fucking movie and it didn't have any stars in it."
I'm the fucking star.
Yeah, exactly. So I think he thought like I could do this without stars.
You're right.
And,
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so and now he reflects
hubris.
on it. Hubris.
Yes.
That's actually the title of the chapter.
It is
in his memoir. I think it is. Yeah.
I love that.
Well, he's
I love that
self-aware,
he
at least.
No, I love that he had some self-reflection on it, and as he got older and looked back on all the times that he made bad mistakes or was an asshole, and
he does.
tried to own up to it.
He does in the memoir, especially in the Exorcist stuff. But he talks here about how he really regrets just not, he should have bent on the location, got Steve McQueen in the role, given his girlfriend a fucking role or a producer credit, let's just go, and he didn't. Lino Ventura was on the fence, and then Mastriano was out because of a family situation, and so he didn't get anybody he wanted. Basically, he did meet with Robert Mitchum to try and get him in the lead role.
Wow.
That's wild.
That's very interesting.
And he met with him, had to go toe to toe drinking vodka with him at 11 in the morning, and Mitchum ultimately said, "Why would I want to go to Ecuador for 2 or 3 months to fall out of a truck? I can do that outside my house." So,
but dumb shit. All these comedians.
I know. Yeah.
I love that when people are like, "I'm gonna someday this anecdote's gonna be written down in a book, so I need to have a good line."
Yeah. Right. Exactly. So at this point, the studio was not enthusiastic about the movie. He couldn't get the cast he wanted to. So this was the time where he did take a step back and try to refocus and get something less ambitious. Roy Scheider's name came up because after The French Connection, he made a splash there, but he had just been in Jaws, man, and so he was a big deal.
Which was the top movie. It, like I said before, it usurped, the brief reign of Exorcist as being the top film ever. So seems like a smart decision to me, though the star of Jaws is the shark and not quite Roy Scheider. But
yeah.
What are you going to do?
Totally. But Roy and Friedkin had some beef because Friedkin turned him down for the role of Father Karras in The Exorcist. So Roy was bitter, and Friedkin.
Well, they knew each other from French Connection anyway, right? So
yeah, no, they did, but like he was still bitter during The Exorcist being turned down, and so Friedkin still even then had misgivings about bringing him back. But Universal said they would greenlight the film with Roy as the lead. They said that was good enough. But they, he had to obviously, recast those other two roles. And the studio, even then with Roy attached, was like, man, we're not going to do this until we find a financial partner to share the risk with this movie because it's too much money. It's too big of a risk. And so actually when you're in trouble when you have to bring in another studio, when you got two studios back in your film.
Not a good sign. I got to say the studio had the right instincts. This film did tank,
Oh, yeah.
I feel like everybody was along the way had they were a little unsure, but it was just that era where they just trusted the artist and believed in him, and he was a genius once before. And I think that they were.
I'm hearing that they had a lot of misgivings. They were not.
Yeah, but they still gave him tons of money, to do it. I mean, they still let him do it.
Yeah.
But they had to bring on Paramount. Paramount stepped up to the plate, and they came in, shared half the costs. But they told him you have to film it in the Dominican Republic, as there were ways to further amortize those costs. And so they went and they toured Dominican Republic. He wasn't as happy with it, but he found a town he could live with and set it in.
It's supposedly the reasoning for that's because the parent umbrella company that owned Paramount was Gulf and Western, and they met with that guy Bloodhorn, the Charlie Bloodhorn, and he's recommended Ecuador because they already Gulf and Western already had all these holdings there, and control of the government, so they are already this corporation that was embedded in that
the Dominican
country,
Republic. You were saying
Dominican, right?
Stuff. Yeah,
right, and they were
sleazy, like colonizing,
exactly
movie studio stuff.
And I think he thought he could start like a film studio there or something, or like make that a center of production or something. There was some slimier kind of corporate, exploitative rationale behind shooting there.
Third world exploitation. Yeah.
So then Friedkin says that the film became an obsession. It was to be my magnum opus, the one in which I'd stake my reputation. I felt that every film I'd ever made was preparation for this one. Tom.
I didn't say anything.
But he did note that when he was in Ecuador originally touring, originally looking for locations, he saw that on the trucks that people had written, like they'd given the trucks names, and you see that in the film as well, like Lazaro, which he actually saw and uses in the in the movie. But at the same time, he was, for the other truck, he was listening to Miles Davis's record "Sorcerer." Okay, and that's where the title comes from. Yeah.
It almost makes me think it's a good title.
I know.
But it's not. It's
Yeah,
not.
I did not know that.
I can't be the only person who was disappointed that this wasn't about
A wizard movie?
A wizard, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
No, well, like I said, I mean, part. I've read that Friedkin in the back of his mind was at least like, I don't know if they're like maybe like glancing at Exorcist directors' new movie Sorcerer, and they're not really paying attention. They'll just file in because it seems like, of course, the Exorcist guy made the Sorcerer,
Right.
you know, and
Right.
Yeah.
I vaguely remember that as a kid. Even it was like
It is a deal. Yeah.
everyone did think it was a horror supernatural thing, you know, and
I
the
think I
music
read
actually lends itself to that in the trailer, you know.
Right.
Somewhat.
I read some criticism saying that people that thought it was The Exorcist went in and were disappointed, and then other people wrote it off because they're just like, "Oh, it's that Exorcist guy doing the same thing again."
Oh,
you know, so
yeah.
it appeals to nobody. You know?
Right.
Right. Well, his original title he wanted was Ball Breaker.
I love that. I read that. Yeah. Now that's William Friedkin. Like
That's a title.
One.
That's
a
a title.
killer title.
Yeah.
Would that have been one of the like? I'm assuming one of the names of the trucks then in the film, right?
Maybe. I don't know.
That's the conception.
I don't know.
Okay.
But
I
the
wanna
studio
see
was like,
Ballbreaker.
"Are you out of your mind?"
Yeah, no way. Of course. No.
So it turned out, he says in the book, it, quote, turned out to be the most difficult, frustrating, and dangerous film I've ever made, and it took a toll on my health as well as my reputation. So we talked about the opening vignettes, but getting into the Dominican Republic, and here's an example of how dangerous it was. Basically, as soon as they got there, the fixer that they had, who was supposed to secure them permits and allow them to shoot anywhere, didn't come through, and so he had to meet with a Dominican army colonel who had recently just executed a communist in broad daylight in a restaurant for the hell of it. And so this colonel agreed to meet with William Friedkin and some of his crew and at his home. And so Friedkin shows up. There's 12 soldiers milling about with AK-47s scattered around. And the colonel didn't speak any English. And so the screenwriter, Wally, spoke Spanish, so he translated. And so the colonel gave him a proud tour of his paintings and his kitsch that he had all around in his house. And Friedkin said, it was all truly garbage, And so as soon as the colonel guy would basically like, so what do you think of this painting in Spanish? Friedkin would say out loud in English, wow, what a piece of shit that is. Or, wow, pure Howard Johnson, And so Wally was like, he was doing it like as a rib, like he was trying to make Wally trying to make Wally laugh, but he was fighting back laughter. And then it became apparent that later into the meeting, the mistress of the colonel actually spoke English and heard everything he was saying. Right. And he says that it is a fucking miracle that she did not give them away, or he might not he might have died right then and there.
Cut his head off. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but as we get into these scenes that take place in a Colombian village, the establishing shots, man, are amazing in this movie. You see all the doc style establishing stuff. It's incredible. You start to hear that Tangerine Dream soundtrack. Which we should talk about, here for a second. You want to take that away, Marcus?
Sure. So all I know is that, it was a couple years earlier, he had actually saw Tangerine. He was in Germany. They were already a band since maybe 69 or something. Then they started playing like flute and stuff. They'd changed a lot, but it was originally just kind of like flute and
They were
It was
krautrock
always spacey.
with some electronics. Yeah.
Yeah, they called it like Kosmiska or like cosmic music back
Cosmic.
then, right?
Yeah, Kosmich.
But so he saw them play at in the Black Forest at a church. It was a 3-hour concert that started at midnight.
Amazing.
It was in complete darkness with the only lights being the little LEDs on the synthesizer. So it was the only lights in the whole room, and the entire space is just filled with stoned young people watching.
The world
It's the only
is
way to
not-
see Tangerine Dream, really.
Yeah,
I was
man.
saying,
Yeah.
the world is not a fucking cool place anymore. It used to be. And,
Yeah.
I
that's
know.
definitely when it was.
I know you hate hearing that stuff, and
I
what do we have now?
know.
Just 2 seconds on him and his taste with music. Just to refer back to The Exorcist. The Exorcist had a score made by Lalo Schifrin, who we all know and love. And Friedkin, he hears it and he goes, "This is garbage. It sounds like fucking mariachi music." That's a quote. And then he's just going through, because it's Warner Brothers Exorcist. He's going through like the new releases on Warner Brothers records.
Yeah.
And he's going whatever. And then he hears Tubular Bells. And it's at first like no one would have he probably wouldn't have even thought like this would be good for horror, or no one would have suggested it ever, like a music supervisor, like, why don't you do this weird, electronic instrumental? And of course, Tubular Bells, he saw like the potential for its power as a horror soundtrack, and the rest is history. So big respect to him on his ear. Big respect on his ear.
And it only shows up twice in The Exorcist too, right? At the end, it just kind of bookends the movie too, right? He doesn't actually use a lot of music.
Yeah, but it comes in hard at the end. But I'm just saying,
sure.
and now with Tangerine Dream,
it's so cool.
Yeah, that's all. Anyway,
he
just
said
his innovation.
he did say like if he knew
soundtrack.
about Tangerine Dream earlier, he would have put them on the soundtrack to
Cool.
The Exorcist. Much to the chagrin of.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah,
But
Mike Oldfield,
also
sad.
We should also say with the Tangerine Dream score, this idea was that he sent the script to Edgar Froese, and he said, let me know what you think. And it wasn't until they were filming on location in Mexico, they actually moved, we'll get to that, they moved the production to Mexico, that just reels of tape showed up, and he had already made the score without even telling him. And so then it's really cool that they just scored the movie to the script. I love that.
That is cool.
Yeah,
that's
it's hot.
amazing.
And I do love that we kicked them off with them being like doing all these soundtracks later, like for Thief or for Risky Business, and
they're the best. They're the best. So real quick in this Colombian, I'm looking at the clock. We got 15 minutes left, and I got a lot I want to jam on here. But just real quick, shout out to a couple of little set pieces in that early Colombian village stuff. You see that like when the fucking refinery explodes, it's an epic set piece. Oh my God. Like there's the big freaking set piece he's looking for there. Epic.
Looks so good.
It looks so good. The dude's melting skin as he's crawling around is super horrific. Then after that, it kind of descends into this chaotic sequence that seems like something out of, I'm going to drop Oliver Stone reference here. It looks like something out of Salvador, where they're doing like the like crowd surfing of the dead bodies.
That came to mind too. Yeah,
when they're standing around the truck.
That's my favorite scene in the movie. Actually, that's devastating
mental
stuff.
It is. It's hardcore. You feel the pandemonium. You feel just like that. This is a crazy place. Where are we? It's hell on earth. So on and so forth.
Well, there's some emotional power there too in seeing those bodies being carried by the people, and I think a lot of the movie is like devoid of emotion. So that's like one moment where you get to feel something.
True.
Agreed.
True. And one thing about this movie too is, right after that, and it establishes the mechanic, this idea that they need to get this nitroglycerin over to the oil rig so they can blow it up and stop it from being on fire and stuff, so on and so forth. That's when we get this killer montage. They've fucking recruited the 4 people, and they're fucking men on a mission, and it's montage mode where they're fortifying the fucking trucks, and they're really getting into it, and it's incredible. And he would hone that montage style even more so into To Live and Die in L.A. has some killer montage work, and it reminded me of that. But Tom, you also said before we started recording that one shot in this sequence that you said was like the 80s and the 70s.
Oh, well, yeah. It's just right. The music drops, and it's all blue lit, and the headlights of
backlit.
Drop, and of course everything's misty. Like they dropped a lot of mist on the set. And I just went to myself like, that's the first shot of the 80s, and it's in 1977. You know,
Yeah.
I've always felt that way. I usually think Suspiria, but that's a little more complicated. But that really is like a preview of another time in movies, right there in the middle of 77. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I love how the trucks look like dragons too. You know, like they've got this like it almost has like a big gaping mouth for
Yeah.
the grill, and there's kind of like spikes going down its nose, and
It's cool.
Of course, there's like a Captain Howdy drawn on the truck too, right? There is like an exorcist demon drawn like as a graffiti on one of the trucks.
Yeah, right.
That's cool.
There's a couple of spots in the movie where he like coked out, I guess, put in a couple straight up exorcist references. Because there's also like a face in the mountain, but yeah, it's definitely got like a Captain
Love it.
Howdy graffiti on the truck.
That's cool. So yeah, and then more issues, more problems on set. So basically, when he saw the first rushes of all the jungle stuff, it was all underexposed. He was fucking pissed, and he fired the DP and hired a new one. Crew members were getting seriously sick from food poisoning, gangrene, and malaria. He says almost half the crew went into the hospital or had to be sent home. So just these, and you really feel it when you're seeing these set pieces, especially getting to some of the most dire ones. You really start to feel just like, how did Roy Scheider get through this? How did they get through this? It must have been a fucking just hell. And let's just get into two of my favorite set pieces in the film. Two probably the biggest ones: the bridge crossing scene. You know, and for him, for Friedkin, this was the big scene. This was the important scene. And he says it's the most difficult he's ever attempted at filming. This is kind of an interesting fact. It was designed and concealed with a hydraulic system with metallic supports. So each truck was able to be invisibly attached to it, so it would sway, but it wouldn't capsize. And that was the idea. The bridge itself cost $1 million and took 3 months to build. And as it was finished, because they like chose this river rapids for it to like build over, and as they were building it, the river dried up. So they're like, "Fuck, there's no water. This is a nightmare." And so it was like, what do we do? And so he was unwavering. There was escalating costs. They were losing crew, as I said, to illness, and they decided, YOLO. We're going to dismantle this bridge and move it to Mexico, where they scouted a new location for a river to shoot that scene. But guess what happens? The fucking river dries up while they're setting that up. Yes. And production had to be halted in between that and everything. And so he says, and how they finally did it is they brought in large pipes and pumping equipment and had to basically Fitzgeraldo style, move water from one place to the other in order to do it. Yeah. And he says that the sequence is 12 minutes in the film. It's incredible shit when you see it.
Yeah,
but that sequence itself cost more than $3 million in order to do. So a huge percentage of the budget. Yeah.
The best parts of this movie are just pure suspense. And like that is, that bridge moment is just, you're on the edge of your seat. And like, it is something that he really is the master of. It sounds like a platitude or whatever, but I think it shows this movie is just, I don't know, the suspenseful aspects are so well executed.
It's incredible.
Suspension
just
bridge.
So tense,
Yeah.
It's so tense. And the idea, of course, inspired by Wages of Fear, but the idea of also transporting this material that could explode, you could die, is incredible. It adds so much to an already intense.
Must be the most expensive case of dynamite ever purchased, though, right? Like, I'm wondering the whole time, why didn't they just buy some new dynamite from somewhere
and
else?
like fly a helicopter?
No, you wouldn't have a movie.
I know.
But that kind of forecasts,
right, okay. No movie.
But that sort of forecasts like movies like Speed or like these kind of gimmick action films that would like happen in the 90s that were like, okay, you got to do this, but this is like the fucking the handicap, right? So it's an amazing idea. But that set piece is so intense, so incredible. The way it's shot, the way it looks, the graininess of it, the sound of that set that whole set piece is incredible. Loud, blaring, insane.
Very wet.
Very wet, very incredible.
Supposedly the truck did tank a couple times into the river when they were shooting too, right?
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
It's what he claimed anyway,
Oh,
it did fall over a couple of times.
Jesus Christ. The other amazing
Well, Roy
scene-
Scheider's actually driving too, by the way. Right, like he's they didn't like the stuntmen in the movie weren't actually working a lot. A lot of the guys were doing their own stunts, so he's actually driving. And
Jeez.
had to do like driving classes and stuff.
Insane. One of the other amazing set pieces too, and happens right after that, is the tree in the middle of the road scene, where I love it. That scene is incredible. The editing in that sequence, the visual storytelling, the pure cinema of that is so fucking top tier. And I also just love that. Like, that's just this nature element that's in their way, just a tree fucking laying there.
Well, I love the one guy's reaction is just to fucking laugh.
I know.
Yeah.
You know, like they get past the bridge and then it's just like whomp whomp, you know, like like a tree that's twice or three times as high as the trucks, you know.
Totally. Again, go ahead.
Oh no, it's just a moment for all the characterization to come out, because there's so little dialogue in this movie. You get such a little chance to get to know the characters. But in that moment, like the Palestinian guy gets to use his skill.
Yeah.
You know, the French guy gets to use his skill negotiating their costs. You know, Roy Scheider gets the hitman guy gets to use his skill later, like helping Roy Scheider out. They all have a moment where they can call on their like past experiences to shine, and it's one of the few moments you get to know their character
and care about them, and like you want and you root for them to get past this. You know, at first, and that happens way far into the movie, you know, but it is successful in making you kind of care about them at that moment. But real quick backstory, behind the scenes anecdote. So the special effects guy who rigged the explosive on the tree did a shitty job. It did not really work to Friedkin's satisfaction. So what does Billy do? Of course, he calls a friend in Queens, New York, named Marvin the Torch. Okay. Now, this guy, real connected, of course, Marvin. It wasn't his real name, but it was his nom de plume. He was known for blowing up failing businesses to cash in insurance money. You know, turning grocery stores into parking lots, as he put it. So he basically called him and was basically, I need you down here, and you need to do this. And so he came. The
New Jersey connection.
He came to Queens
connection.
So he comes down to set, and he basically has like two suitcases worth of goodies, and he puts them down there and blew the fucking tree to smithereens, and then departed and left, and that was it.
Wow.
Brought in some fucking mob arsonist to do the job. Incredible.
That's an only Friedkin moment.
I love that.
Only.
Yeah.
There's one more important detail about that scene. I think the fact that after the explosion happens, there's not like a big celebratory moment like in Star Wars, and they blow up the Death Star. Everyone's like, Yahoo! You know, there's like a big celebration. And then at that moment, it just cuts to the next scene. So like, I feel like that's kind of informs the whole tone of the movie. You know, they just kind of they hit an adversity that they're forced to overcome, and they don't like pat each other on the back. It just keeps trudge through this horrible task that the Sisyphean horrible
existential bleakness. Well, it's I'm glad you mentioned Star Wars, because it couldn't be more different, and that's your choice. Like this door, watch the people not cheer that they're going to live another day, or watch cute robots like cheering.
Just because
that was the choice people made.
Just because we're sub 5 minutes on the clock, this is brutal. I'm just going to talk about just a few. Let's just rifle through a few other moments here through to the end of the film that are worth mentioning. The scene where the French guy and the Palestinian guy die is super harsh. It's so cold in this movie, where he's showing him a picture of his family. He's he's wanting to go back home. He just fucking drives over the wrong piece of ground, and they fucking flip their bitch, and they get into the they roll down and explode.
More great editing.
Yeah.
Great editing.
And it is the only moment of warmth in the whole movie, I think, is him talking about his wife back home and showing her the watch. It's the only moment.
And then they die.
And it's immediately pulled out.
Yeah. And then of course, it's amazing how it cuts back to Roy and the assassin guy as they're looking on in the distance of the exploded truck, knowing their fate, like, oh shit, something might be up there. That's incredible too. Just like, visual storytelling. It's incredible.
Yeah, good point.
The bandits scene is really another way to ratchet up the tension.
I love their dialogue. Like, the little dove doesn't want to leave its nest.
Totally. But then they get this then they get this brutal moment of just like pure violence, where they're chopping people up with
into the
fucking shovel to the neck. Yeah. Wicked. Awesome. So great. Of course, the assassin dude gets shot. That's harsh. and he dies a slow death, bleeding out in the truck.
It's a bummer we never learn anything about like his motivation or where he's from or anything. It's kind of a bummer. It feels like it might be
on the
cut out of the
floor.
movie or something. I would like to know more about him.
Probably. Then we get this incredible fucking hallucinatory sequence, one of the coolest scenes in the film, where you're seeing all this double exposure, stuff of like driving through what now looks like a desert wasteland and laughter and playing back clips from
it looks like
earlier in the
another
film.
planet almost.
It does.
Like a planet of lightning.
Right.
Yes.
Or like some persistence of time, like Salvador Dali or something.
Yeah.
Landscape.
And
It's great.
Purple horizons, like there's purple horizons, which are super sick. And then, of course, it just gets to this point. Like when we see that, there's incredible sound design in that moment. And then, of course, the car breaks down. It's like, and there's a great little visual detail of the speedometer. He's just 2 miles away because he's written in chalk 218 miles to the location he needs to go.
Right.
And it breaks down to 216. And that's just like another heartbreaking thing. And then you see that look on his face, Roy Scheider's face, when he's carrying that case of nitroglycerin and his fucking, he is totally warped. And he reaches that fucking oil fire in the darkness. That is some great.
That's killer shit.
So
He did it.
he did it. He did do it. And of course, he's going to get his citizenship. There's a little epilogue there where he then dances with one of the local women who we see as kind of a recurring background character in this. But then the movie sort of ends on kind of a weird, ambiguous note where you get, which I think also hurt it maybe, where you get the two guys who are sort of responsible for Roy Scheider being in Colombia are basically going to walk into that restaurant.
Dropping by for a visit.
Yeah, a little visit.
And then credits.
Was it one of those dudes, Randy Jurgensen, too?
That's my homie. That's my homie. Randy Jurgensen, who is the real life New York City detective who always helps Friedkin get away with crazy shit and cruising and French Connection. He makes a cameo in this. Shout out to Randy. But yeah, man. Film.
Well, what do you think? Like, what do you think is going to happen to Roy?
I'm sure they're going to ice him. It's kind of Sopranos.
For some reason.
Sopranos, season finale or series finale
Got
moment.
like minutes to live.
It has to, yeah. But as Tom said, the film was a box office bomb, and basically Friedkin attributes it, to Star Wars. He says the title, as Marcus said, was a big problem from the director of The Exorcist, didn't help it, and the fact that the ending was ambiguous, and then. He also acknowledges the fact that a lot of the reviews were incredibly negative towards the movie. A lot of personal attacks on him, from his callous and self-involved behavior from the time.
He didn't make a lot of friends going up the ladder.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so, yeah.
It is stunning that this was cost $22 million and Star Wars cost $11 million. So
it was
double.
twice Star Wars.
That's pretty well. And also they turned it, apparently Friedkin had an opportunity to produce Star Wars through Francis and, when they started the director's company and he and Peter B passed on it. So
yeah, that looks like a losing horse. Good luck with that one.
All right.
Wow.
And
that's the headline, Marcus. Just the totals of the budget. Holy, that's blowing my mind.
All right,
Yeah.
wrap it up. That was
No,
one
I'm
fucking
done.
hour.
That was my observation. Budgets.
I know. We got a gimmick here. All right, that was 1 fucking hour on Sorcerer. A lot left on the table there, but look, man, that was a look into one of those crazy production stories. But really, truly, the movie, it does have, I would say, some unevenness to it, maybe some flaws, but at the end, I will just say, kind of who cares, because the movie is so insane and has some incredible set pieces. It's fucking Sorcerer. So, and of course the movie
When
has
it's
been
good, it's really
reevaluated.
good.
Yeah.
Well, if we're cheating, I think it's surpassed it. Now it's eclipsed Wages of Fear, right? Like it was just a remake of that movie, and now it's the one that people think of for that story, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say so.
No,
old
totally.
Black and white movies don't have a lot of.
But it does have a resurgence. Sorcerer. I know we're cheating, but he died, and we're gonna do this. Sorcerer did have a little bit of a resurgence because, when it got remastered and it came back out, and there were screenings and new DCPs and so on and so forth. It did get out there, and it was reevaluated critically, and a lot of people. There are a lot of fans of this fucking movie, and people really do like to get behind it, and I can see why. It is kind of, it definitely. I think it's the story behind it, the movie, and had no chance of success because of Star Wars and for what it was. But I think you can look back at it with hindsight and say, wow, that's a pretty fucking bold ass, crazy movie with some great
I'm
set
glad it
pieces.
happened while he was still alive, to see that in the last 10 years, the reevaluation.
Yeah. Totally. All right. So there we did. Little cheat, but who gives a fuck? That was 1 fucking hour on Sorcerer. Let's talk about next week, guys, because we're rolling on to 1978. We're getting to the end here of our 70s run. For episode 78, let's talk about what films are going to be on the Instagram poll. Of course, you can go to our Instagram profile at 1 fucking hour on Instagram. And if you see this, if you're watching this within the first 24 hours of this episode airing, you'll be able to participate in the voting. And we're going to give you 4 films that we've picked from 1978. You vote and tell us what you want to see us cover for next week's episode. So let's go through the choices, talk a little bit about them. I know, Tom, this is a big one for you. I know you've talked about wanting to do this one for the show a number of times. It's a big Tom film, I think. And that would be 1 fucking hour on Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yeah, it's a remake, actually, to speak of remakes.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I won't get personal about it, but but I could if this film is picked. No, it's just really great. It really holds up. It was Pauline Kael's film of the year.
Wow.
Believe it or not, for 1978, it was. Read a review.
I did not know
good.
that.
And I think she gets it. No, it's just it works on many levels. It's a social satire and a snapshot of a time, of the like people self-help movement and bullshit like that. And it's also a pretty damn good horror movie, and it gets kind of gory and
trippy.
I think it holds up great.
Yeah, a lot of great trippiness in that movie too, for sure, right? Like
yeah. The ending.
Sure. Oh, very good. Very good.
More Sutherland, please.
Yeah.
Definitely.
More Sutherland, that's right. Option number 2 is our first Paul Schrader directed effort, which would be 1 fucking hour on Blue Collar. Starring, of course, Harvey Keitel and Richard Pryor, sort of a union crime drama. Tom,
comedy.
Any thoughts? Comedy, sure. Any thoughts on
Kodo?
Yaphet Kotto. Oh my God, another big, huge actor of the 70s as well too. But any thoughts on the film Blue Collar and what the episode might be like?
Marcus?
No, actually, I've never seen it, so I'm looking forward. I hope it wins because I've never seen it.
Come on, everybody, help little Marcus out to see the movie.
I do like me some Yaphet Kotto though. So
he's a big Yaphet Kotto fan. Pick at the Blue Collar. No, it's really great. It's it's Schrader coming after Taxi Driver, writing being the screenwriter of that one, and they gave him the keys to direct an entire film. It's pretty wild. There's the soundtrack, the theme song is by Captain Beefheart. It's pretty cool, and it really is a comedy as much as anything else, but also a very heavy social satire comedy. And it's about how the blue collar worker gets shafted 8 ways to Sunday, and it's these guys trying to fight back, and it's a great snapshot of and it's a great snapshot of 70s low income living.
And auto
really
workers.
Gets under this. It's great. Blue Collar is very special. Still underrated.
Yeah, totally. So that will be option number 2. Option number 3 is 1 fucking hour on Girlfriends, you guys.
Nice.
Very excited about that. Feels like a very modern, ahead of its time movie for many reasons. Obviously, directed by Claudia Weil. It's a female-directed movie, but it's just, sadly, you didn't see a lot of movies about women with women characters, and their sort of true friendships and everyday life and their trials and their struggles. That was a very rare thing to see in 1978, unfortunately.
Well, it's the Bechdel test is applied here.
Right.
If you guys can read up on that, but it's basically a movie where all the female characters maybe talk about things other than their boyfriends, that kind of thing, and they talk about their careers and each other and their lives. And no, it's great. It's very special, and it was unique for this time, and it's still pretty advanced even today, I would say.
Absolutely, very influential.
It's depiction of half of the population of the world. Not bad.
Very ahead of its time. Feels like a movie that would come out in now, It's very proto in terms of an indie film about that, and it is a little Sex in the City. No, I'm just kidding.
You know what? That's true.
Well, female camaraderie is alive.
No, I understand. Yeah,
Lots of
that's true.
shoes.
No,
like
there's no shoes.
Sex and the City at its best. Yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Nice.
Had to get my quota in for one Sex and the City.
Of
reference
course.
per
Yeah.
episode.
It's the new
And the last option is option number 4. It's a documentary, and it's a very important, pivotal documentary made by one of the more famous doc filmmakers there is, man. 1 fucking hour on Errol Morris's Gates of Heaven. Man, go ahead.
I love the way this movie looks. I love the way it's shot beautifully. The way that they frame up these interesting characters is basically like his look. It's a pet cemetery or funeral home. I can't remember, but
Pet Cemetery.
Pet Cemetery. So you get to meet all this interesting cast of characters who have chosen to given their dogs or their pets like a nice funeral cemetery plot, and you get to I don't know, just meet a lot of interesting characters, and I like that it's focused just on like kind of quirky people. And it feels like, I don't know this for a fact, but it feels like the first feature-length doc that to just kind of like bear down on some quirky, no-name people,
Right.
And
That's true.
go along for the ride into their world.
Yeah.
And it's really great to watch. I never saw it again on VHS, so it's so much fun for me to revisit these movies when they're on film, because you get to see like the full frame and the film grain, and it just has a much more special quality viewing it, like a really nice copy of it. So I'm excited to review.
It's special. And we're talking earlier about how like the first shot of the 80s is in this movie Sorcerer, 1977. This feels very much like, in a good way, like one of the first 80s films, in that it's about, like you were saying, like it's just about people, real people. It's a little quirky, but it's warm. It's not like, look at these
freaks.
Like anomalies of like our failed social system. It's just like, I don't know, just people living, and maybe this is the way they live, and that's okay. And it just feels like a totally different attitude, very hip and small, I think is the term. It's a film that spoke to smallness of life and depicting it, which became much more big in really the 80s, and then maybe even more in the 90s. Almost like indie culture.
Definitely more in the 90s, yeah.
Say.
With
Yeah,
like
more
these
than
kind
that,
of
yeah.
like these kind of quirky, eccentric doc characters that we follow. It kind of
now
comes
commonplace.
ubiquitous. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
like
it kind
King
of
of Kong or something.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of comes and stems from Gates of Heaven in a lot of ways. I definitely be excited to talk about it. It's definitely the catalyst for Werner Herzog eating his shoe, which I'm sure we'll get into. And God, you gotta love that amazing set piece of that long-haired rock and roller guy just playing his guitar amp out into the hills.
Yeah.
The vastness of
His
the
old
hills.
pooch.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's incredible stuff.
Yeah, it's
Great
very cool.
choices. So
It's a good year.
It is a good year. This is your job, everybody. Vote on one of these 4 movies. It's going to be 1 fucking hour on Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Blue Collar, Girlfriends, or Gates of Heaven. One of those choices for 1978. And of course, we're going to keep rolling through here until October. That's when we're putting a stop to this plan, because we're going to transition into obviously our One Fucking Tober is coming back. So we'll be doing horror flicks all month for October. So I think that gets us up to like 1983. I think is what we're getting up to,
Which is what we were guesstimating.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, so it's like 68 to
October
83.
We do what we
Yeah.
always do. And,
Yeah, here we
horror
go.
and more horror.
That's
Yeah.
right. So we're going to be doing that for October. So so get your votes in. Also head over to Patreon, patreon.com/onefuckinghour. Sign up. It's just $5 a month, and you get instant access to all of our DVD commentaries that we've done. Check out What Women Want, and we're also going to be unveiling the next audio commentary on our next episode. So next week, we'll let you know what we're going to be doing for the next audio commentary. So sign up in the Patreon, or scroll down to underneath this video on YouTube, click the join button to become a member of our YouTube channel. Same difference. You can sign up there for $5 or on the Patreon. Same perks, same bullshit. That's it. Thank you, everybody. And I guess we can't leave you. Hold on here. Let's see. We can't leave you without your...
Kind of slow.
Oh,
Oh, what's she doing here? Oh no, the close up, the punch in mouth. All right, we got this.
oh, sorry. We can't leave you without your
Momen.
There it is. Of Zen. All right, everybody. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you for 1978. All right. Bye, everybody.
What would you consider the greatest invention by humans?
Well, there's so many inventions, but to me, I think the greatest thing that has come from human beings is faith and love. And I see that in your film. The electric light bulb is no longer a mystery. The television set, everybody can work one now. But the secret, the mystery of love and faith are still unknown and remain mysteries. Well, congratulations to all of you.
Motherfucking goddamn orange peel beef.
That was wicked, man.